I ran into some quad problems, and I was doing some troubleshooting, and I just wanted to do a quick video on that and kind of how I got to that point. This is the ZMR 210 build that I've done a while back and have been flying since then. And this is the original flight controller that I had on it, the Multirotor Mania Mantis flight controller, and I was using the Red Rotor power distribution board to get, and this has on-screen display support, so that's what I was using to start out with. And then when Betaflight, the flight controller software that I use, came out with their on-screen display support, I decided to get a flight controller that had that built in. And so this is the flight controller that I got, and this is the on-screen display chip there. And this flight controller worked pretty well, but it now needs to be replaced. And the reason for that is, to start with, at one point I lost the ability to have the on-screen display, so I didn't have any telemetry in the video. And then something happened after that that is no longer usable. Now when I plug in the USB, I think there's a short in it because it gets extremely hot, and it can't even talk to the Betaflight software any longer, and so something internally is wrong. So I decided it was time to replace that. Need a new flight controller, and also I decided it was time maybe to upgrade the quad. These motors are pretty well worn, and the bearings aren't that great anymore. So I ended up going with a long X frame, and this is the new build that I have, and you can see how much longer it is. It's still a 5-inch quad, but you can see how much longer it is. And so the advantage of that is as you're flying, the rear props aren't going to get as much turbulence from the front props as you're tilted and flying forward, so it's better. And this one also is actually quite a bit lighter in weight than this one. I haven't weighed them, but I can just feel just how much lighter it is, and it's noticeable as you're flying too. It just the way it handles, and plus these motors are much nicer than the old ones as well. But I started running into a problem where it was just flying around the yard. It was crashing, not pilot error. There's something going on it. So I started to do some troubleshooting, and well, first of all, what I went with was the Betaflight F3 flight controller down here. So it's an all-in-one. It's the power distribution board, has the on-screen display, and the Blackbox logging as well. So it's a pretty nice flight controller. That, along with the new motors and the Run Cam Eagle, it's a nice camera. So I'm really been happy with the quad. But I also turned up my RC rates on this thing pretty high, so that it's very sensitive, and I'm still getting used to that, and still ended up crashing quite a bit. But now it's having some sort of issues, electrical, mechanical, I'm not sure which. And so I use Blackbox logging to kind of isolate and tell me what the problem is. I haven't, well, the one thing I do know is that the problem is from either, my best guess is that it's from this electronic speed controller. The flight controller connects to the speed controller for each motor. Each motor has its own speed controller. And so right now, my suspicion is that it's the speed controller, the ESC right here, electronic speed controller, is faulty. And so I've ordered a replacement, and I'll replace that, and we'll see if that fixes the problem. But what I wanted to do was go through and show you on the Blackbox logging how I can tell that the problem is coming from this motor. So we'll go to the computer and take a look at that now. Now I have the Blackbox log loaded in the Explorer, And we can see how you can tell that it's this motor number one, this back right motor. Looking at this line here, this purple-blue colored line, here is the gyro. So that's telling us what the copter is actually doing in the air. And these other lines are the PID loop. Each one of these is like the red is the P term, the green is the I term, and the yellow is the D term. But we can clearly see what's going on with the P term in the PID loop. And so what happens here is as we're coming along, all of a sudden you see the gyro starts to indicate that the copter is turning and it's beginning to roll. And over here you see the stick commands, and there's not a lot of movement in the stick commands. Over here it would be if I were commanding it to roll, which I'm not commanding it to roll. So something is going on the copter itself, and the gyro is telling us that it's beginning to roll. The flight controller senses that, and what it's doing is it's telling this back motor to spin up to create more thrust to compensate for that, what it's detecting. So this is what we're seeing. It's not actually what the motor is doing, but it's what the flight controller is telling it to do. And the flight controller is responding to this movement that it's detecting, telling it to create more thrust, and it's not happening. You can see with the gyro that even though it's being told to spin up, create more thrust faster, the gyro continues to show that it's going into a spin, and at that point we pretty much lose control, and it just flips out, and that's pretty much the end of it. But right there, we can see based on the log, the black box logging, that the flight controller is sensing it, the gyro is telling us what's going on, the flight controller is commanding it. So that points that we either have a motor problem or the electronic speed controller, the ESC, is having a problem where it's cutting out and not responding, telling the motor to spin up. So I've ordered I'm suspicious that it's the speed controller. So I've ordered a new one of those, and hopefully that'll take care of the problem. So we'll see. We'll catch you later.